Hello, OFAD lads and lasses. Just a reminder, there is a Delivaway ongoing. We are giving away two winners. A copy of Sean Mathis's book, Is the Church Pro-Gay? We just had Pastor Mathis on recently. If you'd like to listen, you can learn more about that book and enter for an opportunity to win a copy of it. If you'd like to do so, go to our website, onceforalldelivered.com. You will see a link there for Summer Delivaway 2024, and you can follow the instructions there to enter for your chance to win a copy of this very helpful and very important book. Again, it's Is the Church Pro-Gay by Sean Mathis. We're giving away two copies of it. So enter the Summer Delivaway 2024. And with that, here is today's episode.
Contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. In times of spiritual and moral chaos, it can be hard to discern truth from error and to apply it to all of life. God's word is not silent, and we don't have to be either. This is Once for All Delivered with Caleb Castro and Andrew Smith.
Welcome back to Once for All Delivered, a podcast, period. I am Andrew Smith. I am joined for the first time in a while by...
Oh, sorry, you meant me. Caleb Castro is here.
Yes, Caleb Castro is here.
Our listeners had received an email update several weeks ago, almost a month ago now, I suppose, that there had been a big flood in the town where I pastor in Rock Valley, Iowa. Basically, heavy effect upon the homes of a number of congregants here with the displaced families. Two families lost their homes entirely. And our church basement was almost 4 feet underwater. When someone came to go and check on it about a day after the flood, the doors opened, and he opened the doors of the basement, and fish came swimming out. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scene. So we had to entirely gut the basement down to the studs, and there was much cleaning and disinfecting. We just had an ozone generator here in this last week to purify the air and get rid of some of the sewage smells. But we have had much prayer, much support from volunteers, hands helping out, and service and free will offerings being made. And we're on the path, thankfully, to God's mercy, to restoration of our building. Things have kind of settled down now to the point where there's opportunity for me to be able to come back to recording. And so that is where we're at.
Yeah, so we're back to, I guess, semi-normal.
Yeah.
It won't be particularly normal as we get into the topic today that we get into at the time we are getting into it.
Well, and Andrew, if I might preface that of how this came to be, I guess. Yeah, so we already planning about a week ago for doing a return, my resuming duty as co-host, and we decided we would do one of those go back to the questions you've never asked but we're going to answer segment, kind of like what we did with women in office bearing, and so on. So the two topics had come up. We were kind of discussing them. One of the ones that we wanted to talk about was a pressing question for a lot of Christians in the United States right now. Now, this topic is going to, for that matter, pertain especially to the United States of America. Recognizing not all of our listeners are in the U.S. We do have listeners in Canada, Philippines, so on and so forth, many places. You might not find this in one manner directly applicable, and yet we're still going to hope to cast some kind of precedent or mold in order to help with situations in your own country and so on. That's the preface, the preamble here. So the question that has been pressing for those in the United States of kind of more conservative and Christian conservative persuasion is, should I vote for Donald Trump? And we know Trump is a controversial figure. I'm curious what listeners in Canada, UK, so on and so forth, other places, what they think of Donald Trump. And why do you have so many evangelicals, Christians, voting for him? Now, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew here because Andrew had already mentioned given the timing of certain things here, it is, again, we had already been planning on talking about this question of why vote for Trump or should I not vote for Trump. So, Andrew?
Yeah, so we were going to talk about this before last week. So I don't know when this will actually air. We're recording it on Tuesday, July 16th. Rare case where I'm actually going to tell you the exact day because who knows what will happen even in the coming days. So we were going to talk about this before. I guess the first major development chronologically that brought this issue back to the forefront is there was a debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Caleb, did you watch that debate?
No, I didn't, as we don't have like a cable live TV, but I did go and watch it after it was posted. So yes, I did after the fact and kind of more of just skimmed through the primary things. And there's a good reason why I really pretty much skimmed through it. And you probably have the same sentiments if you watched some of it.
Yeah, I actually I watched the entire thing live because I don't know, I guess I just had nothing better to do that night.
Apparently. Was it worth it is the question.
Well, as debates go, I would not consider it particularly productive. It was revealing in some ways. And one of the long-running concerns about Joe Biden and his presidency is that he manifests various signs of cognitive decline. And that was quite on display and undeniably on display during that debate. I mean, let's not make any mistake. Donald Trump is not a young man by any stretch, and he shows his age at various times and ways. But Trump was still able to, for instance, generally formulate sentences and not trail off in the middle of them. Biden was having a really rough time up there. And after the debate, the reaction to it, a lot of the people who had been supporting Biden or denying there were any problems with him, fellow Democrats, the media and such, suddenly started piling on him about he's too old, he is in cognitive decline, it's time for him to go. Though many of them coming from this, like, how come they hid this from us, even though it's pretty obvious they've been covering it up for a while. Now, that's not to say that Donald Trump had the best of nights that night either. This was one of the earlier instances where Trump publicly voiced his support for the availability of mifepristone, or however you say it, the abortion pill, which the abortion pill, as it stands now, accounts for, last I'd heard, over 60% of abortions that are still ongoing in America. So Trump said he was basically agreeing with a Supreme Court decision that had come out in June right before this debate, which I'll come back to that here in a little bit. But basically said that the abortion pill should be readily available. He is doing this for pragmatic reasons. The reasons, he has stated this before, he stated it again at this debate, he has stated it since, is that abortion is a losing issue politically, and so this is basically a concession to political pragmatism. We need to not come after the abortion pill because it will cost too many votes. It will be politically too costly. And Trump has said it basically that you have to win. You have to win the election. And so in order to win the election, you have to not regulate or restrict abortion any further, at least at the federal level.
Yeah, and in kind of a summary, and that would be, you would find, if you were to go through news articles relating to his statements or the topic of the abortion pill, you're going to find generally that abortion as a whole is like about 2/3 of Americans are in support of abortion in some way to various differing extents. And this would include also the question of, say, do you abort if someone is a victim of rape or incest, right? You have those who kind of will meld certain soft lines that are in support of abortion to one extent or another. And as Andrew had already said, this will come back up later as we talk about giving away a bit when we talk about J.D. Vance. So with that, that's just the first instance. So this was already the pressing question of, well, Biden's clearly not able to be, on a cognitive basis, able to be commander-in-chief, president of the United States. For those who are registered Democrats, then there's some serious questions of who do you go for, who do you vote, and so on and so forth. But for those who want to hold to a kind of more Republican and conservative approach, is Trump the only option? Trump, he has not been confirmed as the Republican candidate at that point.
Believe since then he now has.
Yes,
been.
since then.
The convention is ongoing this week now, and I believe they have officially nominated him.
Previously, you still had Robert Kennedy Jr. in the running. So at this point, he was not the candidate. But since then, there's been an intensified event, which the world has heard already at this point, on the assassination attempt on Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania just this past Saturday.
Yep. So he was holding a rally in a small town, Butler, Pennsylvania, I believe is the name of the town, at a fairgrounds there. Someone was able to climb up on a roof on a building approximately 150 yards from the podium where Trump was, with a rifle, with a rangefinder. Apparently he was spotted before he shot, and people in the crowd noticed him, noticed he had some optics, noticed he had a gun. They were trying to raise attention to the authorities, and nobody did anything until he fired.
Not entirely true, where you did have one police officer or allegedly go up to the roof, and he looked over and found himself staring into the barrel of a rifle. And that police officer retreated or chickened out, one of the two. I mean, it either, as some have put it, it's either it was a tactical retreat or they got scared in some sense, understandably, staring down the rifle of a gun, staring down the barrel of a rifle, and they pulled back from the rooftop. And in that moment that he pulled back from the rooftop, the shooter realigned his shot, realigned his scope, and then back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so at the very least, though, he was not confronted, even though it seemed that at least some were aware that he was there and with ill intentions. So he fired several shots. I've heard as many as 8 shots, possibly, that he was able to get off, one of which hit Donald Trump in the right ear, removed a portion of the top of his right ear. You've probably seen the photos by now. There was blood everywhere. You can see a bullet hole in his ear. Not sure if it was the same bullet, but some of the bullets that were fired did hit, I believe, at least 3 bystanders. 1 was killed, 2 were critically injured. And then after he fired several shots, then the shooter was taken down by the snipers on site. Just to put this in a little bit of perspective, I know there's probably, because of where some of our audience is and stuff, probably people who have not or do not ever use guns and know quite how they work. A shot of about 150 yards. The difference between hitting a target right where you aim and missing an inch to the left is virtually nothing. Any number of things or any lack of things can cause you to miss by that margin. And that was about the difference between what we had and Donald Trump dies. And we wake up on Sunday in a very different country. I don't have any doubt that had Donald Trump been killed on Saturday, that there would be a very intense reaction, to say the least. I don't know if it would get all the way to like a civil war scenario or something, but given as divided as things already are in this country, I could imagine it would lead to some pretty terrible things rather quickly.
Right. In one respect or another, in missing the shot or hitting the shot, this is really something of a catalyst for the state of our nation and the division as a whole. The question is, what is the extent of the response to it, right? And that occurred according to what actually took place. The shot did miss, so there weren't immediate riots or brawling in the streets, and fights breaking out between Republicans, Democrats, conservative, liberals, whatever. We do recognize, on one extent that, all things being of the Lord's sovereign will, the Lord did not will for Trump to be killed at this point, and stating this and for whatever reasons of his own secret purposes. There, of course, have been responses from Trump supporters that take it as, that kind of take the reading into it a little too far. I remember seeing at least one post saying that the assassination attempt occurred at 6:11 p.m. I believe that would be Eastern time. And someone then cites Ephesians 6:11, which would state, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you might be able to stand against the schemes of the devil." It's reading in and applying a chapter and verse number, which we have to state is arbitrary in the first place, as they weren't original to the manuscripts of Scripture.
Yeah, added many, many centuries later.
I could go and pull up, let's just say Genesis 6:11. And, okay, so Trump was shot at 6:11. Genesis 6:11 says that, now the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. I mean, we can go on and on with this, and you can get some pretty ludicrous applications. Point being, this is read into quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yet we do confess the Lord did ordain in sparing his life. For whatever reason.
A lot of the takes, too, have been something to the effect of, well, it was a miracle that Trump survived. I mean, why did he turn his head at just the right time and all that? Well, just so we're keeping our biblical and doctrinal and theological categories properly clear. And we've talked about this in more detail as we've worked through the catechisms. This is a good time to revisit briefly our doctrine of providence. God ordains whatsoever comes to pass. So yes, God did will. God did bring to pass these events as they did. They were determined from eternity that this was how it was going to go. But that's everything all the time that goes on in this world is according to God's hand of providence. So it's not proper to assign any particular supernatural occurrence or significance to this event other than beyond, well, it was the will and the providence of God to at this time spare Trump's life, even though he was very close to losing it.
And you say improper, and I think we can go. I think we can go further in saying that. First of all, this is virtually divination, right? In trying to read into an event and discern or presume the will of God or the purpose of the will of God in His secret counsel. This is prying into certain things. Yes, we can be glad. If someone is a Trump supporter or whatnot, that he was spared. And even if someone's not a Trump supporter, you can be glad that a man was not assassinated in broad daylight or whatever. A man wasn't murdered. We wouldn't want this for Biden. We wouldn't want this for Kamala Harris. We don't want just some kind of anarchist or revolutionary plot being taking place. We're against those things. Reading into this, especially in pretty much going and just plucking a Bible verse like, oh, the time was 6:11, Ephesians 6:11 says blah, 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 blah. Well, that's using the Bible like a divining rod, using it like, like a horoscope or something of the sort. That's divination.
Yeah, which I might be wrong about this, but if so, that's what editing is for. But if I remember correctly, the person who said that, I think, was Jack Posobiec, who's a right-wing pundit, and he is, if I remember correctly, a Roman Catholic who made the 6:11 remark. So
well, I have no idea, but I could respond with Galatians 6:11. See with what large letters I have written to you with my own hand.
There you go.
We can just keep spinning these, but
yeah.
Anyways,
so that's not a good way to study and use your Bibles.
Well, there's on the other end, look at the responses though to on the other side of the progressive and liberal wing. This isn't to say that every single one says this, but there were a lot of posts on Twitter and threads and Facebook and so on from liberals that said, that would say something like, sad they missed. I mean, like a ton of posts. What was it? I think I actually just read something from Not the Bee, I think today, of Jack Black's bandmate for Tenacious D, Kyle Gass, saying something like, just an inch to the right or something, right?
What it was is, I guess it was his birthday, and so Jack Black brings him a cake out on stage and asks him what he wished for, and that was Kyle Gass's wish, that the shot was an inch to the right and that Trump had died. There was some other, famous or semi-famous people that were saying similar things. One was the video game streamer and famous liberal Destiny.
Well, this is to say what I mentioned a moment ago of how, this is a catalyst of sorts. The matter is, the degree of what the responses said. And we can go into those responses in a minute here. But as it were, this was an enormous failure in the first place on the Secret Service.
Yeah, it looked bad. If you're even just, seeing the clips and everything, the famous clips of Trump standing up after he was shot and pumping his fists in the air, yelling, "Fight, fight, fight," or where they're carrying him off and he's bloodied on his ear. And you do have to admit, he looks pretty tough there. But then you also look at what's going on around him, with the agents, the law enforcement and stuff. They're clearly disheveled, disorganized. There's the fact that, a sniper was able to get on a roof 150 yards from the former president and current presidential frontrunner and take a shot like that. Yeah.
Across from him.
Yeah, that was somehow not covered in the security parameter. And then once it happened, well, we already mentioned that there was many that tried to draw attention to the shooter and nothing happened until he had already been able to fire. And then the photos and the videos you see, the Secret Service agents that were there, many of them were women, rather small women. You could see one in a picture was struggling to holster her gun after, as they're rushing Trump to the car. Yeah, she's clearly visibly shook and not really able to respond properly to the situation. This does get back to something we talked about a few episodes ago when we talked about, we started talking about women in office in the church and ended up sort of venturing off into women's roles more generally. There's a reason why through history that roles like military and law enforcement and things of that sort have not been occupied by women. There's something unnatural. There's something not fitting about putting women in harm's way, in a position where they're going to be taking bullets from hostile men and things of that sort. On the part of the security and the Secret Service, it was a very off-putting display.
That video you were mentioning a moment ago of the woman that couldn't holster her gun, she was next to another one or two women, I think one more woman, and the two of them are pacing frantically back and forth, not knowing where they're supposed to be. And actually at that time, and you listen to the audio when Trump was shot at, you could hear the voices of several women, Secret Service women, shouting, "What are we doing? Where do we go? What do we do? What are we doing?" It was just chaos. In the very least, regardless of someone's positions on women's roles, you could state these ones that were selected to serve as Secret Service at this event were not competent. Even less competent than those the Secret Service men or individuals who were scoping out and supposed to be securing this perimeter and somehow failed to secure the location, the rooftop where that shooter was, despite them having previously acknowledged it was a hole in security. That was a potential security issue. Nothing was done about it. These women, in the least, you can say they were not competent for this position. And why were they not competent? Who's in charge of the Secret Service here?
Yeah, the current head of the Secret Service. This is going to make for some editing, but I should look up her name just to be specifics.
Woman McEstrogenson.
Yeah. What? Those are kind of words. The current head of the Secret Service is a woman named Kimberly Cheadle. She, before being appointed by Biden to her current position, she had worked at PepsiCo as a head of security for a few years. Before that, she had served many years in the Secret Service. But one of the major initiatives that she has led was a drive to increase the number of women who were Secret Service agents. She wanted to get it to be as much as 30% of the force, because the Secret Service, as with most law enforcement, has been historically dominated by men. Now, this also comes at a time where Trump and his campaign had requested greater security, and the Biden administration had denied them. This is the same administration also had, I believe on a couple occasions, at least once, but possibly multiple times, denied security, Secret Service protection to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is running for president, which if you know anything about the history of the Kennedys, assassination plots have been a repeated issue there. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s own father, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., was assassinated while running for president, and yet he was denied Secret Service protection until this incident and until Trump, in a speech, basically called Biden out for denying RFK Jr. Secret Service, and so now he's getting Secret Service. So there has been a lot of speculation, a lot of questions about, was this intentional as far as Biden denying security to his political rivals? I don't know. I don't think we may ever know. It's one of those things that's just deep inside the government that, you know, maybe in 50 years they'll declassify, or I don't know.
Yeah. As it is right now, the initial response from the Democratic Party and kind of the big Democratic heads right after the assassination attempt, I mean, within minutes, within the hour, they started all coming out and releasing their statements, right? I mean, one of the first ones I remember reading was, Nancy Pelosi. She's going in and thanking God for, that Trump is safe, right? She'll pull the quote here. She condemns the shooting, and she said, "As one whose family has been the victim of political violence, I know firsthand that political violence of any kind has no place in our society. I thank God that former President Trump is safe. As we learn more details about this horrifying incident, let us pray that all those in attendance at the former president's rally today are unharmed." We had Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States, saying her husband Doug and I are relieved that he, that is Trump, is not seriously injured. We are praying for him, his family, and all those who have been injured and impacted by this senseless shooting. Violence such as this has no place in our nation. We must all condemn this abhorrent act and do our parts to ensure that it does not lead to more violence. You get a number of statements like that, calling this senseless. But a lot of those who were making statements to this effect, I'm just going to bypass the question of their sincerity in the use of invoking God. I think God that da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah. Some potential third commandment issues there.
Yes. So just I'm gonna state that in passing. I can't determine if they are. I don't know if they're believers or not, but we're just gonna point at that for a moment. They do invoke God's name here. Now they're stating that they condemn this act and so on and so forth, but the past several years, since 2020 especially, what has been kind of the rhetoric that we have been hearing from the Democratic Party and the mainstream media about Donald Trump?
Well, it has been over and over again. He's a fascist. He's a return of Hitler. He's an existential threat to democracy. He's all these sampling of the worst possible things that a human being could be. And some commentators, just a couple by name, Tucker Carlson, Orrin McIntyre, he's one I've mentioned before, have all been for months saying that this hyper-escalated rhetoric against Trump, where you basically try to paint him as the worst, one of the worst people who has ever lived, is an attempt to, or at least could be used to justify his assassination.
A fast note, too, before you continue on that. You named two, but we can also put in, just to be clear, Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Kamala Harris themselves have made these sort of statements in calling him a Hitler type, in calling upon Democrats and Americans to rise up and push against him and his supporters.
Yeah. The two names I named, they were ones not who were saying that Trump was this, but just saying if this is what this rhetoric is doing, could be doing, is setting up as justification for an assassination, and that this is why this rhetoric shouldn't be used. You think about it, if you know that someone is Hitler, Which basically, in the popular consciousness, Hitler is the most evil of evil that anybody could be. If you really think someone is Hitler, what would you do to stop him?
Mm-hmm.
What wouldn't you do to stop him?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that I realize probably a lot of what was said was political gamesmanship, but it's also raised questions of, has this rhetoric been in an attempt to incite somebody to try to take out Donald Trump?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know, but it's certainly a question.
Yet there has been, though, in the past 4 years, it seems to be a rise in violent revolutionary riotous actions. We state, yes, also from the right. But more often than not, the instigators of, or even unprovoked in some sense, the instigators of these riots and violent actions on the streets against cops, attacks or assaults on individuals, they're coming largely from the left. There's clearly an increase in anarchy, or at least in violent revolutionary tactics. You just connect the dots there.
And even the very day after the assassination attempt this last Sunday, the New York Times ran a full-page cover on their editorial page as well as articles with it. There's a big, dark, scary picture of Trump's shadow, and the headline was, "He failed the tests of leadership and betrayed America. Voters must reject him in November. Donald Trump is unfit to lead." So using, not quite the he's Hitler stuff, but just that he's so bad. And the very day after, now they claimed it had already gone to print. It was too late to pull it. I mean, I don't know the inner workings of newspaper. I kind of feel like that kind of thing at that kind of time, if you really wanted to stop it, you could, but they didn't. They ran it anyway. Even like immediately after Trump was shot and they took him away and everything, there were anchors on CNN criticizing him for standing up after he was shot, pumping his fist, yelling, "Fight, fight, fight," as he did, because they claim that could incite more violence. It's not the fault of anybody that shot Trump. It's Trump's fault for how he reacts to getting shot. I mean, I would like to say that I'm surprised by it, but it's really the same kind of stuff that the media and the political left have been doing for years. I guess this just goes to show that nothing really, it seems, will stop them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the absolute least, it's the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
In the very least, like depending on how someone might view Trump, the incidents of January 6th at the White House, claims of insurrection, or so on and so forth. Even if someone holds to that, they would still be doing the exact same thing. They have been inciting this violence for years as well.
Right. You think of Black Lives Matter, you think of Antifa in various cities, and just, it's not like this is just going one way.
Yeah. Now, prior to this, as we had said, prior to this weekend, Trump was not the official Republican candidate. And along with this, there was a list of potential vice president running mates that had been getting shorter and shorter. There was much speculation on who it would be, and it was whittled down until, was it yesterday, right? Yeah, it was just yesterday that it was announced that Donald Trump had chosen J.D. Vance, Senator of Ohio, as his running mate, which, just as a note, back in 2016, Vance was strongly opposed to Trump, very, very outspokenly critical of him, and especially on his rhetoric, Trump's rhetoric. He called him a very non-Christian character. Kind of some of the typical criticisms you would have heard about Trump at that time. I mean, I myself, back in 2016, I was not in favor of Trump, and I had these same criticisms of the question of his character and professed Christianity. I did not vote for Trump in 2016. I was a third-party guy in that.
As was
very
I.
Very tiny third party. Yeah, I've always been very critical of Trump's character. We'll get more into that later in our thoughts on this, but just transparency there. I'm not critiquing J.D. Vance as a hypocrite. People's political thoughts could change. J.D. Vance was outspoken against Trump, but by the end of Trump's term in 2020, Vance had become more approving of him. Likewise, again, myself, I thought it was a very good administration overall. Vance, though, had also been quite outspoken against abortion, including abortion for rape and incest. He focused more on saying that, why condemn a child, a baby, to death for the evils of someone else? Why add another evil upon an evil? So he had been very against pretty much all abortion until now, him being chosen as vice president, or just prior to, where he agreed with Trump's position on abortion pills. So he came to soften on his previously, consistent anti-abortion Christian view.
Yeah, it's an interesting development because I know that before Vance took his new stances on abortion, he was still being floated even then as a possible vice president pick, and I was generally I thought that would be a sound choice. What's going on now that Vance is waffling on that? Not sure. We'll come back to that a little later. But Vance, he had a strong record opposing LGBT, opposing transgender procedures. He had some interesting pro-family proposals. I heard of one that would give additional weighting to votes of families who have children. And Vance was chosen over some other candidates who probably would have been a lot weaker and a lot more problematic. Some of them were floated were Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, Tim Scott, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. All of these are probably a lot more typical GOP establishment type figures. Vance is young. He's a millennial. He was born in 1984. Before he was a senator, he kind of broke through with a book, Hillbilly Elegy, which was made into a movie. Full disclosure, I have neither seen the movie nor read the book, but I know it's a thing. So yeah, Vance was picked as a running mate at the convention, which is ongoing, and it's still ongoing, but already in just the first day, there's been some other fascinating developments there. There was what was her name? Something Rose. Essentially a porn star was given the center stage and gave an address.
Was it Stormy Daniels?
No,
Stormy?
No. This was at the RNC. It was is it Amber Rose? I think it's Amber Rose was her name. She was allowed to give a speech, and yeah, she's a porn actress. And then there's been this presence of this group. They call themselves the Log Cabin Republicans. They're Republicans, but they're pro-LGBT. There was a Sikh prayer that was led at the RNC last night. So, that's all stuff. I'll just say on that, I know every time these conventions come around, they're always weird. There's always cringe. There's always bad stuff that comes out of them. So I can't say I'm too surprised or too alarmed at this, but those are all developments as well.
Just as an aside here, I was checking out something, and in the process, I saw a news article from CNN saying, this was just 30 minutes ago, saying that Secret Service, this is the title of the article, Secret Service ramped up security after receiving intel of Iranian plot to assassinate Trump. No known connection to shooting. You do kind of wonder of the potential red herring here. It says U.S. authorities obtained intelligence from a human source.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to a donkey or what? Who else is telling you information? U.S. authorities obtained intelligence from a human source in recent weeks on a plot by Iran to try to assassinate Donald Trump, a development that led to the Secret Service increasing security around the former president in recent weeks. This sounds like an implicit defense in saying, we have been giving Trump adequate Secret Service security detail.
I would just say if this was the increased security under which all of these events occurred, then what was it before that?
Right. They're claiming that the attempted assassination on Saturday from Thomas Crooks was not connected, or there's no indication it was connected to the Iranian plot. And it goes on to say the existence of the intelligence threat from a hostile foreign intelligence agency and the enhanced security for Trump, it makes sure to note there, raises new questions about the security lapses at the Saturday rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, and how a 20-year-old man managed to access a nearby rooftop to fire shots that injured the former president. So how did that lapse occur? All it does is beg the question, one way or another, no matter what you're saying. If this is the enhanced security, then why did this occur? So, anyways, yeah, so you have this, I would call red herring to try to take criticism and heat off of the Secret Service and Biden's administration and so on and so forth. Wow, so that's breaking news.
Yeah. So that basically is the recent history and developments surrounding Donald Trump.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For the latest news and updates, visit our Substack at onceforalldelivered.com, where you can also support our work with a paid subscription. You can also follow us on social media at OFAD Podcast. If you like what you have heard, leave a 5-star review where you get your podcasts, and spread the word about the show. Once for All Delivered is hosted by Andrew Smith and Caleb Castro, and produced by Andrew and Heidi Smith. A special thank you to our founding members, Eric and Kathy Hepker. We hope you will join us again next time on Once for All Delivered.